Today, we're going to talk about LinkedIn and how you can grow with Nigel Thomas. Nigel is the CEO of Alpha Inbound, an ad agency who took his agency from 5K to 140K a month in just the last 2 years. But we're also going to talk about the power of being an entrepreneur, the upsides and the dark sides that go with that as well. Nigel, very happy to have you on the call today.
Really appreciate it. And hopefully, we can get some nuggets of wisdom out there. This is all about you, the listener. We can have a great conversation, but ultimately, my goal is for you to take something away and more importantly, execute on that. But I tell you what, I love entrepreneurship. I love the fact you're having these kind of conversations. So let's push on and give the world what they need.
Okay, so first, a bit of backstory. Tell us a bit about how you went from 5K all the way up to 140K and what that journey was like.
Yeah, I mean, do you want the short story or the long story?
Let's start short and we can build on it from there.
Sure. So basically, in the back end of 2021, I joined Alpha Inbound. And well, let me just give a little bit of context. So I'm not your typical entrepreneur. I didn't sell sweets at school. And honestly, I didn't even know what entrepreneurship was until I was 26 years old. I had to Google it. That's pretty embarrassing, right? And when I was at school, I got incessantly bullied. I don't know what it's like these days. I'm 32 years old, but when we played physical sports, all the guys had to shower together after we played. And I remember because I had a really aggressive skin condition called eczema, standing there fully naked in the showers with wounds and scars all over my body as all the other kids laughed at me, telling me how ugly I was, telling me how I'd never achieve anything in life. And because of my dry skin, they used to call me Krusty the Clown. And I've never felt so humiliated or vulnerable in my entire life. And the reason that I tell you that is because I've always seen myself as an underdog. And in that moment when I joined Alpha Inbound, that was 2 years ago, like you rightly pointed out. I'd had quite a lot of failures in my entrepreneurial career. And this was a moment of redemption for me. So I made a promise to the founder. I said, I'm going to get this agency from five to $100,000 a month in revenue. Don't know exactly how I'm going to do it. I just know with this underdog mentality and all those people who had done me wrong, I'm going to use that as really dark energy and I am not going to stop. I am literally not going to stop until I get this job done. So that was a start. Twists, turns, ups and downs. I mean, we can go into it. We can obviously talk about LinkedIn. It was a lot harder than I expected. But in September 2023, we actually blasted through that goal. And now we're at 140,000 a month. Although it wasn't a fairy tale ending, because even though from the outside looking in, everyone thought, we'd done amazing things. I've grown a personal brand to over 41,000 followers on LinkedIn. From the outside looking in, it was perfect. But on the inside, I was crumbling. I'd lost a person that believed in me most, and we can get into that. And I was on the brink and thinking about taking my own life. Now I've got through that and I've got my new mission, which I can get onto, going into the new year. But this is the reality of entrepreneurship. Sure, you get the highlight reels on LinkedIn or Instagram, but it's not about the Bugattis and boats. It's about blood, sweat, and tears. And ultimately, this is a journey we all go on. But damn, I wouldn't change it for anything, man. I fucking love it so much.
I love that response. And I appreciate the honesty that goes with that as well. First of all, like bullies in school, man, they're like the most brutal fucking people ever. It's crazy how savage they can be. And I think that's almost like a good practice for when you become an entrepreneur, because that's where you start getting like brutal feedback all the time. But
Yeah.
you're dealing with somebody who's like bullying you and giving you shit. That's one thing. But as an entrepreneur, that feedback, the worst feedback often is the feedback that you never get. And it's like you keep driving and you keep doing things and nothing seems to matter. And people aren't telling you like, hey, this is good, or hey, this sucks. Like I would
Mhm.
actually encourage people like, tell me that I suck. I would rather you tell me that than to just be like indifferent and ignore it. And that's
Yeah.
something that I don't think a lot of entrepreneurs really embrace or are prepared for.
Yeah, 100%. But I'll tell you this, I'm actually grateful for all those people who bullied me because without them, I wouldn't be the man who I am today. And even at the time, I was had more of a victim mindset, and I was like, why me? Why have I been put in this position? But in reality, the thing is we talked about this before we started the recording. If anyone out there who's listening knows crossing the chasm, it basically talks about market adoption of companies. And right at the start of the curve are the entrepreneurs like your Steve Jobs and Elon Musks that think of these crazy ideas. And they're the innovators, that 2.5% of the population. And they think of the crazy ideas, crazy until genius, right? And then the rest of the world adopts them. Now, it makes sense, doesn't it? If it's only 2.5% of the population, you're not going to fit into most crowds. And I understood, I couldn't make sense of this, but now I understand it. I'm different to most people. I've not actually been diagnosed with this, but I'm pretty sure I've got pretty severe ADHD. But ultimately, my brain just works differently. I didn't do well in school. I didn't really fit in with anyone. And there's a lot of people out there, man. And I hope someone listening to this podcast can just know that there is a place for you in society. And often the people who feel most left out and are the loneliest are some of the most important people in the world. And they're the innovators that are going to come up with these crazy ideas and change the world. So I think for me, it was honestly, looking back, it gave me so much drive. And now, as Steve Jobs says, you can connect the dots looking back. And I'm actually grateful for that experience. And obviously, it toughens you up and prepares you for the real world.
I completely agree on the ADHD side. So my stepsister, she teaches neuroscience and she's a nurse practitioner who she used to work in psych wards. So she's seen some shit. And she and I were talking about this. And one thing that she really impressed upon me was that if you go back, let's just say 500 years, or let's go back even farther, like several thousand years, and you look at tribes, like a tribe might only be 200 people, give or take, and they're going to be wildly disparate in the way that they look at the world, their skill sets, and whatnot. So, somebody with ADHD, for example, could be amazing at being like a scout to actually go out. They like to be stimulated, they like to constantly see new things. And because of that, they're really good at that. Whereas you take somebody like me, who's more of just kind of like a quiet, introverted strategist type, like the idea of being responsible to do something like that would drive me nuts. Like I am just not hardwired to do that. And I think as time goes on, it becomes increasingly important to recognize that just like there's different learning styles, there's different thinking styles and different personality styles. And if you can learn to leverage the powers that all these different types have, you know, ultimately that's like what a tribe used to do. And maybe we've lost that along the way.
100%. It's actually very interesting you say this, Adam, because this morning I was having a conversation with my best friend and I was literally saying the exact same thing to him. And this is fundamentally why I don't believe in solopreneurship, because ultimately, the reason that we're here today having this conversation is because we banded together as tribes and we got through it. So, solopreneurship is basically going against our human biology. And sure, it's a great opportunity to decentralize, a lot of big corporations and have that constraint so we can drive innovation as entrepreneurs and come up with weird and wacky solutions to solve, the world's biggest problems. But ultimately, to get through the hard times, you need deep, meaningful relationships. And that's not what social media does. Social media leaves people at home working remote jobs feeling extremely lonely and they don't feel like they can talk to anyone. And especially guys, they really struggle with this. And ultimately, sure, I think it's good to build a team, but it's about really understanding what your actual strengths are. Because I don't really believe in trying to work on your weaknesses. I believe find what your strengths are and then go all in on your strengths and then build out a team of people, even if it's just contractors and then you just focus on what you're good at. Because there's an analogy that I often talk about, which is who is the most important person? And let's just we'll go with the Elon Musk example, getting humans to Mars. So is it the guy or the guys or girls who are essentially building the rocket to space, the most intelligent people in the world, the highest IQ, absolute geniuses that are building the rocket. They know how to build the rocket. Or is it the leader that gets 10 to 20% out of each of those incredibly intelligent individuals who are building the rocket, even though he doesn't know how to build it himself, and he leads everyone and he drives them all forward? And it's a trick question because the answer is without either of them, it's not possible. But that also shows you that you need a tribe to be able to pull together to achieve massive things. Because when I was at school, just understanding complex maths problems were really, really challenging. But all of a sudden, when I get into entrepreneurship, leading teams, it's like a walk in the park for me. It's so easy, like communicating with other humans, getting the most out of them, motivating them, sacrificing for them. And this is where I know I shine most. And I wasn't taught this in the education system. And, I certainly wasn't taught this when I was working at home alone. I found this out when I started interacting, connecting with other people, and building deep, meaningful relationships.
I love that you used the word lonely. There was in our newsletter, we had recently published something in which we coined the term the lonely middle. And it was that spot that lies similar to crossing the chasm. It's that spot that lies in between the idea and then success. And the thing is with the lonely middle is that it could be really fucking long. It could be weeks, it could be months, it's probably going to be years, and it may even be like the majority of your life, depending on the business that you do. You said that your great strength was actually leading teams and working with people. How did you make that transition into entrepreneurship, and when did you start to see those strengths emerge?
Yeah. So when I started my own agency just doing a freelancing on Upwork. And my whole idea was I wanted to be a millionaire by 30. I didn't make it, by the way, spoiler alert. When I was 26 years old, when I quit entrepreneurship, as I've mentioned, and I started my own agency. And, I had some wins here and there, but honestly, I was really lonely and I didn't really enjoy it. And I was just like, well, I'm grinding through this to like get a nice car, whatever else, and, have freedom, maybe buy a property portfolio. I didn't really know what I was doing, to be honest. I was just like, I know the corporate world isn't for me, and I know that I'm an entrepreneur, but this doesn't feel right either. So what happened was, and this is a great lesson in entrepreneurship, is essentially I had a massive client that I managed. People say I've got away with words, so I'll let the listener be the judge of that today. But essentially, I managed to get an 8-figure sportswear brand on a call. Bearing in mind, I'd literally just been doing, freelancing work, a couple of $100s here and there on Upwork. And I managed through a cold email to get them on a call, blag my way on to signing like a 7 grand a month retainer. And through that, obviously, it was life-changing money at the time, right? Like 3x my salary from one deal. My mind was blown. But the problem was the ads, honestly, because we were running paid ads for them on Facebook. But it was almost too good, the results we got, because one day they called me and they said, "Hey, Nigel, we've got great news, fantastic news." And I was thinking, where is this going? And they were like, "Our company's being bought." But unfortunately, they have an internal marketing team. So as of today, your services are no longer needed. And at that point, it was 90% of my revenue, and I was done overnight, right? And my plans were turned upside down. So I did actually consider going back to the 9 to 5 and throwing in the towel on entrepreneurship altogether. But, luckily, I came across a guy who needed a marketing agency built from scratch because he was running some other businesses. He wanted to start a real estate lead gen agency in the US, helping realtors find more home buyers through Facebook ads. So I said, fuck it. Like, I need a redemption story here. So I'm going to get involved and I'm going to build this thing. And I built the thing from scratch and got it to a 7-figure run rate. It turns out that that guy was actually a narcissist. But here's the thing. I had like, because this was in the height of COVID, right? So whilst the world was going crazy, I never really watched the news apart from when I spoke to my parents who used to bang on about it. I was having the time of my life, man. And maybe that's a bad thing to say, but it's just the truth. I got to the point where I literally lost the concept of time. I wasn't even eating sometimes because I was so obsessed with my work. And what I was loving more than anything else is because I built a team of 20 people, and people said to me, like people who worked multiple jobs, had said, "You're the best manager I've ever had." And by the way, I'd never managed anyone before that. It just came natural to me. And it was there where I realized my greatest strength is, inspiring other humans and getting the best out of them. And that's where I found my true calling. I mean, it was quite lucky, to be honest, but I guess maybe I just followed my heart and did what was right.
Wow. There's so much to unpack there. And I think that a quick lesson which I learned early on as well was the power of diversification. So if you have one client
Yeah.
that's generating 90% of your revenue, pretty soon you're going to have a lot of sleepless nights worrying about losing that client. Because as we all know, if you're on the agency side, the day you sign a client is the day you start losing them. And
Yeah.
it's inevitable. That's just going to happen. That's just the way that it is. Um, you and I were talking once on one of your excellent LinkedIn posts, which I recommend everybody listening check out. Nigel's got a lot of great stuff. We talked about the idea of risk, and a lot of people think of risk is like it's either risky or it's not. But you have to start thinking about risk in like multiple dimensions. That you can move away from one risk, but you're usually going to be moving towards another one. So, like, just a simple example is if you take all of your cash and you put it underneath your bed because you're worried about, losing it in the stock market, for example. Well, that's great, but then you have the other side, which is inflation is eroding the value of that. And you have to learn to sometimes do what looks like it's risky on the outside, but it's really a way to hedge against these other forms of risk that we're basically always surrounded by.
Yeah.
With your approach to how you grew the agency, I imagine you encountered a hell of a lot of risks along the way. What were some of the biggest risks and how did you overcome them?
Yeah. So there was, sorry for the listeners there. I was hopefully the editor could make that up. I was just thinking about it because there was a lot. And ultimately, in entrepreneurship, I call it the push and pull effect. And I think a lot of people avoid this topic. So, this is the brutal honesty. Unless you have a connection of people you already know, or you've got a name somehow from some other walk of life, or you're from an important family, for 99% of people out there, no one cares about you or your story at the start. That's just a reality of how it goes. Okay. So at the start, you need to use brute force and what I call the push effect to get yourself out there. And the best analogy to use is you're banging on doors and you just keep banging on doors until someone opens one. And a lot of them are going to get slammed shut in your face. A lot of people are going to be pissed off, but you just got to keep believing and keep banging on those doors. Now, that's a metaphorical, analogy. You can apply that to posting on LinkedIn. You can apply that to sending out cold emails. You can apply that to cold calling. But ultimately, you have to push your message out there through brute force. And that's what we did. We used cold email at Alpha Inbound, and I used also LinkedIn. So in February 2022, I started posting on LinkedIn. And I said to myself, and I think this is extremely important for anyone out there to understand, is set yourself an undeniable expectation, which is I said to myself, I'm going to post every single day. I'm going to do all the engagement and everything else. And I'm going to learn, I'm going to understand how to do copywriting every single day for 12 months straight. And guess what I'm going to expect in return? Absolutely goddamn nothing. And I mean that. I can put my hand on my heart and tell you, I absolutely meant everything of that. Who is crazy enough to go in there, going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm, right? Who's crazy enough to do that? Well, most people aren't. And most people within that 12-month time frame came and went. Some of them grew a lot faster than me. I didn't grow that fast. I went from 0 to 7,000 followers. And then this year, I went from 7 to 41,000. But it was only because of the work that I did in that 12 months and because I pushed and pushed and pushed. And at the time, because obviously LinkedIn wasn't bringing any sales in whilst I was doing the pushing at the time we were using cold email to grow the agency. And then all of a sudden it switched. And then you get the pull effect because that's when, obviously, the reason why I'm having this call today, because you found me from my LinkedIn content, people see that not only are you pushing, you're also giving advice and you're doing what you say, you're documenting your journey, and then people come to you, and that's where the pull starts happening. So I think the risk side of it is just understanding at the start that don't have the victim mentality because no one's coming to save you. Like, no one's going to do the work for you. And you have to have the undeniable approach of banging on as many doors as you need to bang on until people start coming to bang on your door. And until that happens, the reality is you're doing the wrong thing, or probably most importantly, you're not doing enough of the right thing. And that's just the truth about entrepreneurship.
I love that. In particular, the push versus pull. It's like I was chatting with Adriana Tika a couple weeks ago. Really, really smart, successful marketer. She's run her own agency as well. And she always said that you really have to grind it out at first because social proof is something that you build. And then you kind of reach that point where you shift from push to pull and things just start to work on its own. And I think that's the
Yeah.
kind of dream for any business. But
Yeah.
you have to get out and make it happen. In terms of risks, that was more of like sort of an external risk. What about
Yeah.
for yourself internally? What risks did you have?
Yeah. So I mean, it was obviously at that time there kind of the philosophies that I applied to kind of negate the risk in my own mind. But essentially, I joined Alpha Inbound on a commission only, like pay. And I was in a lot of debt at the time, like $50,000 worth of debt. So, and we weren't making any sales because there wasn't a business there. So there's no operations or anything like that. So I was working and I needed money to pay the bills, and there was no sales coming in, right? So that was a lot of risk. Now, how did I encounter that? If we use the push marketing effect, basically got to the point in November 2021 where Josh, the founder, was thinking about pulling the plug on everything because we were losing money at the time. So I basically said to him, I'm going to do something that's going to make it absolutely unreasonable for us not to make sales. And that's when I put this thing together called the Alpha Millennium. So the task was simple. It was so we work with e-commerce brands, so everything, just for context. The task was simple to send out 1,000 personalized 10-minute Loom videos to e-com founders. And I'm talking about getting up their website, auditing their website, and then sending it off in a cold email, directly talking to the founder. Okay, so very personalized approach. I had 3 weeks to do it, okay, before the deadline of the end of the year, before the Josh was going to pull the plug on the whole agency. It got to the last 3 days of the deadline, and I still had 700 Loom videos to record. So at this point, I had a choice to make. I either hoped that the 300 I'd already recorded would get the sales and go to the team and tell them that I'd thrown in the towel, or I had to bite down the gum shield, stay up for 3 to 4 days straight, and get the job done. And that's exactly what I did. To be honest, the choice is already made. I can't quit. I couldn't have looked myself in the mirror. So 48 hours in to that shift, like 48 hours, and I'm not like hand on heart, I'm telling you now for a fact, I literally did these Loom videos back to back to back to back. Like I had an Excel spreadsheet of all the company's websites in there and the owners, and I didn't take like 48 hours, man. I put in all my energy into it. I was absolutely exhausted. Like I've never been so tired in my entire life. And what happened is 48 hours in is I lost my voice completely and I still had another like 300 or 400 videos to record. So I actually, and this is back to risk, and this is what happens in the tough moments. I called up the woman that believed in me most, And I burst into tears and I was like, and I could hardly speak anyway, but I was just like, I don't know what to do here. Like, there is so much risk on the line. I thought this was the challenge that was going to be the redemption to get us out of all this trouble. And now I don't know what I can do. Like, I've literally lost my voice. And at that moment, and we talk about risk and you need the people, and it's kind of coming full circle, this conversation and why I don't believe in solopreneurship, is she said to me this: rest your eyes for 2 hours. Then what's going to happen is you're going to get back on those Loom videos. And if you need to whisper, you need to down honey, sip tea, you are going to finish them. And I believe in you. And you're going to do this. And you have to do this. At the time, I didn't need Adam, anyone to tell me that everything was going to be okay, because everything was not going to be okay. The risk was real. Everyone's job was on the line. And I needed that brutal honesty. And I appreciated that so much. So that's exactly what I did. And for some reason in that moment, I found so much strength. And with 3 hours left, I recorded all 1,000 Loom videos, sent them all out. The next month, we signed 5 clients. We built pipeline for an entire 6 months. It changed the entire trajectory of Alpha Inbound. We never looked back since. But what's most important, when I was facing that risk in that moment, in that dark moment, is that I overcame it and built the conviction. And my favorite quote ever is from Winston Churchill, which is, one man with conviction will overwhelm 100 who have only opinions. Because I knew, however tough those moments got, I could dig in so goddamn deep, like the places I need to go to in my head to get through those 1,000 Loom videos. I knew I could conquer anything after that. So the conviction, man, that I had when I went on sales calls, when I went on partnership calls in front of my team, it was like I was a changed person. And that's the way to overcome risk, is you have to go into those really dark moments, because that's when you find out how badly you really want it. And when you come on out on the other side of that, you get conviction. And the most important thing to take on risk in business is having the conviction that you can conquer the unknown. Because in entrepreneurship, there's always unknown, there's always uncertainty, but having that conviction and that belief is what gets you through.
God damn, man. I'm ready to go out. I've got conviction now just hearing that. That was amazing.
Yeah,
Um,
it was a moment, man.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around the logistics of that too. But
Yeah,
it,
it was mental.
it almost it reminds me of something. I used to be a ultra marathoner, so I go run long
Yeah.
distances. And one thing they always said is if you're running 50 miles, the halfway mark is at mile 42. And so it's like you run the first bit with your body, but then that last bit you run with your mind and your spirit. And like you said, having other people there to support you. So good for you, man. And I love how the kind of topic for the call today was growing on LinkedIn, but I think you've addressed a much deeper issue, which is that challenge with yourself and relying on others to help see you through.
Yeah, 100%. Look, if you can conquer the mind, you'll not only be able to conquer LinkedIn, you'll be able to conquer any social media platform or
Anything in
any
life, really.
challenge. Yeah, exactly. Anything that you're going through. And it's all between the ears. And LinkedIn is just a game of delayed gratification. And as long as you're willing to do something for 3 to 5 years and not give up, then most of the time it works out. It's just most people obviously want that instant gratification. So, as they say, the last mile is the least crowded. So, get through the hard times and you'll see the light. Because, look, the end of the day, and like I was telling myself in those moments, it's the work that we do in the dark when no one's looking that brings greatness into the light.
Love it. Nigel, you've dropped some knowledge and inspiration today. Where can people learn more about you?
Probably on LinkedIn, Adam.
I didn't see
Just
that one
type in
coming.
Nigel Thomas. Nigel
Wow,
Thomas on LinkedIn. Connect me if we're there. And, I always love speaking to other entrepreneurs. And look, I know how hard putting podcasts are together. So appreciate you for putting in this work and getting out the words to inspire more people. And I honestly wish you, the listener, and you, Adam, all the best to have a massive 2024. And look, let's make it a year to remember.
Right there with you. And thank you for your words and, more importantly, your inspiration as well, Nigel. Thanks so much
Appreciate
for being here.